Hey there, folks. How's it going? Jovan Hutton Pulitzer here, and presenting a special Halloween presentation. A little bit of history, but a lot to do with a historian. Yes, this is a historian gone awry, absolutely awry, that is, should we say, um, creating a bit of haunted history. And when I mean haunted history, I'm talking literally wackadoodle history. You're going to want to make sure you stay with this one. I'm going to show you some live video. Hey, give me a shout out. Let me know where you're joining me from tonight, that I can give you a shout out and say, hey, we know we have people that join the broadcast from all over, whether it be Canada or otherwise. Hey there, folks. How's it going? You're right, boo. It is coming up on Halloween time. Halloween is one of my favorite holidays. Now, of course, technically today's not Halloween, but I absolutely love, my two are Halloween and 4th of July. Those are my two favorite holidays. When my kids were young, Halloween was really great because we would always do a scary house for everybody, right? Which I love to do, a haunted house. One of the best things I ever did was taking the young kids around on our ranch in a horse trailer. And we, of course, lock them in the horse trailer, and we drive around. The property had a road around each side, right? And so the balance of the property around the outside was a mile, a mile, and a mile. So it was a 4-mile square. And I can remember when the girls were in dance, dance, whatever you want to call it, they brought all their friends out for a party, and we put them in this trailer, and we're going around the land. Of course, I had one of my workers jump out from the land screaming at a chainsaw in his hand. We took out the blade, right? But the chainsaw still goes, and when he'd rack it up against the horse trailer, it would throw sparks everywhere. These girls were just screaming, and it was absolutely fantastic. So I absolutely love Halloween. And I'm going to tell you a story. Some people get creeped out by things such as, and by the way, let me know what you get creeped out about, and not just getting creeped out about me, because I'm just curious. I want to know that what actually creeps you out when it comes to Halloween time. I'm showing the picture here of the crazy clown. I was never one that would literally, should I say, get freaked out over clowns. Clowns really didn't scare me, but some people truly are deathly afraid of clowns. I don't know why. I guess there's a true system to it. I'll give you an opportunity to guess. I want you to give a guess. What do you think, monster-wise, clown-wise, Halloween-wise, or whatever? What is the one thing that totally freaks me out, actually gives me the EBGBs when I think about it or I'm around them? Try to think about that. What would you guess that would be? Huh? What would you think it would be? Okay. Yep. Clowns. Yeah. Clowns. Some people say it's scary. Some people said, hey, I don't do pagan holidays. Actually, this one's not about a pagan holiday. I used Halloween to tell a scary story, and I'm going to give you the history of the pagan holiday here in a minute, because most people think it's just a pagan holiday, and it's not, right? It's not. So Justin guessed spiders, poltergeist. Poltergeist is pretty creepy. I always remember, they're here, right? Really creepy, really sad that she died. Debbie said snakes. Teresa said pitchforks here. I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna actually give you a picture. I'm gonna show you what totally freaks me out. I think I can do a hard switch here, even though I'm sharing my camera. Let me make sure. I'm gonna go to there. Well, no, I gotta stop sharing my screen real quick. Go back to sharing my screen, and then I've got to give you this sucker. Ready? This is what does it for me. This is my Julia said, stalkers, although they are not only on Halloween. Julia, I told you, I have no problems at all with you stalking me. It actually, I find it very flattering. It's okay, and you can do it all year round. I have no problem with it. Anyway, let's go back to that. Look, this is what freaks me out. Gators, alligators, totally freak me out because to me, they are still the total prehistoric beast, and they scare me. I've been out in the swamps. I've been out with alligators, so deep in alligators, going through the swamps that bass, I'm talking big bass, I'm talking 4, 5, 6 pounder bass, were jumping up in the boat to get away from all of the alligators rushing in. The only other alligator that scares me to death, like it scares some people with clowns, is saltwater alligators. You can actually get in the water with a river, lake, swamp alligator, but a saltwater alligator is the one that will come hunting you down just like Jaws. And even Jaws, right? Even Jaws can't get out on land. So think alligator is Jaws that can get on land. By the way, if you haven't seen the movie Crunch, right? It's probably on your cable box right now. Crunch, or something like that, or Crash, or Crawl. Sorry, Crawl. It's about alligators and a family surviving them. You should watch it. It's actually very good. They did it exceptionally good. I thought it was going to be a cheesy flick. I watched that the other night just to scare the hell out of myself, and it was fantastic. Okay, look, I want to give everybody some history, just some quick history first, okay? Just some quick history first regarding Halloween and where Halloween comes from, to get some of that cleared up, okay? And then after that, I'm going to go into a story that really creeped me out, and it is a historian, right? A literal historian, and so it hits right for home. Imagine somebody that's a teacher and teaching history and writing about it and publishing about it. Totally gone awry. No, this is not bio-autographical. You're gonna like this. It's just freaking creepy. Okay, let me share my screen again. Let's see. Okay, I am going to go right here. Okay, here we go. Okay, let's take a look at this real quick because I think it's important for everybody to I guess really understand where Halloween comes from, because I think it's kind of misunderstood sometimes. But Halloween's origins, and I'm reading from the History Channel, date back to the ancient Celtic festival of Samhain, and it's from when the Celts, who lived about 2,000 years ago, mostly in the area that is now Ireland and United Kingdom and northern France, and they celebrated their new year on November 1st. A big misconception, a very big misconception about it being a pagan holiday. And why is that? It was the holiday of the land, but when the land became Catholic Christianized, Roman Christianized, it then paganism, which only meant country folk, right? if you grew up in the country, you were a pagan. You just didn't come into town. It didn't mean you were a Satan worshiper, a devil worshiper, or voodooist or witch or anything like that. That's not where paganism comes from, right? At all. It meant something. It just basically meant you came from the country. And what they did is they would celebrate. It marked the day of the end of summer and harvest, right? And so this was the beginning of the time when the evenings would get dark. You're experiencing it now. We're all experiencing it now. The cold winter would start, and the time of year was often associated with human death. I think that's very important to understand this thing of Halloween, right? And Susan, this is live. You're here with me, Susan. The one earlier I did today was just a spontaneous one I decided to do. But in going back to the Celts and this holiday of Halloween, as it came about, was after working and toiling in the fields and working hard and everything that went with it, as the cold weather creeped in, it was just at a time when you have to understand, in the dusty fields and harvesting and hard work and strenuous work, coming in with the cold weather, a lot of people would naturally catch what we now know today as to be the flus. Hey, Linda, how you doing? And these flus would always take, meaning kill, a certain amount of people. Okay, and so a lot of this cross triangulation with death and people dying at the time really had to do with the change of seasons. Let's go back to reading a little bit more. But they actually felt at the beginning of their new year, which was November 1st, that the night before is that the boundary between the worlds of the living and the dead became blurred. So on the night of October 31st, they celebrate this Samhain. It was believed that the ghost, in other words, if they didn't rise to heaven, the ghost of the dead returned to earth. Some said that in addition to causing trouble and damaging crops, remember, they thought they had to look for a way to explain how was crop failure happening in the next crops. Celts thought the presence of otherworldly spirits made it easier for the Druids or Celtic priests to make predictions about the future, which, of course, once again, this make predictions about the future is something that the church outlawed, right? The church outlawed, and that was something that was thrown at us, labeled bad, hoodooed. It's kind of like the Malleus Maleficarum, right? If you want to be really church-centric. And it was a book, and the book published, this is how you could tell if somebody's bad, and it ultimately ended up in 60,000 murders. Do you know what that document was about? Right, because it's kind of the same thing with Halloween and paganism and all this other stuff, and that thought still drives today. But that one document was the document that had to do with if a woman could deliver a baby, or if a woman could use herbs to heal people that were sick, they said, no, only the church can heal people, and only the church should help deliver the sick, and you got to pay the church to do it. And so many women did it, midwifery, right? So many women knew about the ancient ways and herbs that the church produced that book and outlawed it, and therefore witches came into being, and they killed 60,000 women because of it. So sometimes the church takes on it back then was not the greatest take. Anyway, enough of that history. Let's get started on what this story is. Okay, and I'm just getting my screen here a bit, and I'm gonna show you the individual that we're going to be talking about, because I think it's really good to put a face with it. So I want to give you a face right off the bat. So let me set my computer here and get the right face for you. And let's see. Okay, there we go. So this is who we're going to be talking about this evening. This fellow right here. Now I'm going to give you a little bit of his his background so you understand who he is, and this is an absolute, real, true, bona fide story, and I want you to listen carefully because this guy's a historian. He's multilingual the whole bit, but he was where he lives, he's international, a true person, and he was a local historian. He was commissioned to go around to 700 cemeteries in 40 regions of where he lived in his administrative area. And all he was doing was re-updating records of the dead, right? Just, making sure they had everybody written down. And he would actually also produce and write stories about what famous people were buried in what cemeteries. And he became known all over the region for being the historian who studied all 750 cemeteries in this region. Now, he really didn't get paid a lot. It was hard for him to survive. He still lived with his parents. He got paid a few ever kopecks, not really much every month. But his work to the history of the area was considered priceless. And he actually would publish for the local magazine and the paper, the weekly paper there that publishes the obituaries. He would author and write stories about, well, this person died, etc., from the community. And then he'd write, well, here's the history of this particular cemetery. He'd give a little bit more tidbit, and you go, and this, famous person was buried in this cemetery. That was what he was known for. Okay, and his work, because this was all about just researching 750 cemeteries. This guy was a degreed researcher. He was a historian, and in all of the documents about this fellow, he was always described as a genius, and he had many multiple scientific papers published. But the fellow happened to have a very odd obsession that was his passion. So you can imagine somebody diving into history and somebody diving deep gets to know the characters of history, gets to know the legends and lore of the land. And so in collecting these stories, he would focus at time, right? He kind of looks scary. Joe, you're right. He kind of looks a little bit odd, right? I guess people could say that about me too, but there's just something about just taking a look at this fellow that something might not look quite right. And it might be that he was just an eccentric, right? Teresa, could be the crazy eyes. I don't know. It could be his crazy eyes. You're right. We all tend to pick up our things on this, but maybe to some people he looks, scary, and some people says, hey, he has some really scary eyes. But I think what probably did him in and made the community kind of think he was a weirdo was he had a weird hobby. Now, his weird hobby was he was a doll maker, right? He was a doll maker, and that's why I'm really just curious about how did this guy, obsessed with history and everything else and going around documenting over 750 cemeteries, and everybody basically saying this fellow is a genius, actually blossom in or transform into something else. So I'm going to show you his hobby. That's what creeped me out. I want to show you his hobby, and I want you to take a look at it. So let me switch to my screen here. And some say that he had, you know, what's the word I want to say here? That he had skills, that he had advanced skills, because he was what's the word? He was maybe good with his hands. I think that's the word I'm struggling with to find here. I'm trying to find the right word to describe it. And yeah, Kevin, you're going to see here in a minute. It's kind of like Chucky dolls, and Teresa, he did stuff. His crazy eyes. He made crazy eyes for this dolls, and that's probably what gave people the weirdie about it. And yes, Russian military in the background. I don't think he served in the military, Dennis, but he was definitely different. So I want to show you his hobby. Let me share my screen, take a look at this, and I just want to make sure I share the right one. It's kind of hard sometimes for me to find the right one. Give me a minute. Okay, I'm gonna close a few so I can narrow down my odds. Hang on, I'm trying to look past my. Okay. You know what? 7-4. Okay. So let me share this. Okay, here we go. Come on. Share screen one more time. Share my screen. Here we go. I still can't tell which one it is. I wish, Julia, I was doing this for suspense, right? It'd be really suspenseful, and you're right. Probably the word I was looking for. It was very meticulous and articulate at the same time. I'm just gonna move this one tab, and that way maybe I can see it better. 4, 6, 5, parents, video. Okay. I know this is like really horrible, right? I'm trying to show you his work, and I can't figure out the tab, so bear with me. And no, I haven't had any alcohol. Okay, trying it again. Chrome tab. Four, 6. Okay, I'm gonna try this. Well, why does it say real found footage? That sucks. Okay. Not that one. See, that's like, I'm trying to show you this beautiful, dexterous. I wish I was dexterous, right? I'm trying to look at all these windows. Let me try it another way. I'm gonna go here, and I'm gonna open a new window. And that way, if I open several new windows, right, this is my reasoning, that I will see all these windows open now, and I'll know that it's the duplicate. I'm gonna try it one more time, ready? So see if I see all there you go. See, now I actually did it. I can see all these duplicates. Now I know what it is. Here we go, folks. Okay, great. Can you see this right here? Can you see that screen? He was a very meticulous doll maker, okay? And that's what kind of made everybody wonder about this guy, is because he had a weird hobby, okay? A weird hobby of making dolls that were basically images of Russian dolls. You know how they have, the little Russian dressed beauties and stuff, right? And so he would make dolls. And these dolls, people would talk about them because they would hear about that, you know, he was making them and stuff, and they would talk about how he had managed the ability to make life size, these really funky life-size dolls, and a lot of it was because he would actually dress them up. Do you see this here? He would go to great lengths to dress these dolls up and make them look absolutely as authentic as possible, right? And so you can imagine this historian who's fascinated with Russian history, and now you've got these dolls he's manufacturing that look like the Russian stuff. Let me show you a few others that you might need to see here. Let's see. Let me go here. Stop sharing screen. Do another. And now I'm just going to kind of do it on the fly and see what it is. We've got let's try this one here. You see that one, right? I mean, check that out. Okay. And you're right, Maureen, you wouldn't want to trick or treat at this guy's house because you would, you know, if you saw him in his doll collection and trick or treat, and he would make these funky dolls, except there was a problem. These are not dolls. These are deceased people that he would dig up from graves, and he would turn them into dolls, right? He would turn these things into dolls. You know, you don't want to go trick-or-treating there, not at all. You don't want to do that. But he would take these and turn them into dolls. But it gets even weirder. So I'm gonna shut off just a few of my browsers because I don't want to confuse the pictures. Okay, and I want to show you only the good pictures. So now let me just get rid of the extra ones I don't need. And we can go from there. Okay. So I'm going to remind you, this is the man. And then I'm going to share you a screen and a video that I want you to listen to with me. And I want you to hear the story of how they found out what this guy was doing. And then I'm going to, this is really weird. Then I'm going to take you kind of through it step by step. So let's get to the video.
Anatoly Moskvin. Anatoly Moskvin is a 50-year-old man who used to live in Nizhny Novgorod in Russia. Moskvin's neighbors described him as a smart and kind person, but what they did not know about Moskvin was that he would often go out at night and dig up the corpses of small girls who had been buried in the local graveyards. After they had removed the corpse of a little girl, so they bring the corpse back home and then mummify the body by using a combination of salt and baking soda. Once the body was dry enough, so they transform it into a human doll. He would stuff the body with rags and paddings, then dress it with chilling clothes and wigs. He would even sometimes put a music box inside a rib cage. Moskvin would eventually be arrested in 2011, and the police found 29 mummified bodies inside Moskvin's apartment, which he had made into human dolls. The police also found several photographs and videos in the apartment, and they even found instructions on how to make a human doll. The police have unfortunately not released any videos or photographs that they found in the apartment, but they have released a video from when they searched Moskvin's apartment that shows several human dolls.
Это что, здесь нет видео, да? Да, из трупов кукол. То есть глину там, да? Да. Там все девочки, да? Ну, как правило. Одежда, новые кладбища, обувь. Черные ссылки.
Moskvin later said that he had removed over 150 corpses from their graves, and the reason for doing so was because he felt sorry for them and that he believed that he could eventually bring them back to life.
Now talk about absolutely weird, right? Let me go back and turn that video off. Hang on. This fellow was Nutapalooza. And I'm going to tell you, how did somebody that was a published multilingual scholar start to where he would literally take these bodies and turn them into mummies? He would dress them up, he'd put makeup on them, put buttons in their eyes. This guy did some really interesting. You're right, Kevin. He dug up 150 of these, right? 150 of these, and he successfully turned 50 of them into bona fide mummies, okay? Bona fide mummies. And I want you to, and what's really interesting here is, let me share this with you. The guy lived at home, okay? Now, these are his parents, okay? These are his parents right here. And his parents, when they were told what was going on, his mother just said, well, we saw these dolls, but we did not suspect there were dead bodies inside, right? They had no concept that their son, right, who was this historian, had now become this doll maker they thought was a hobby. But what they were actually doing is he was digging up the bodies of young girls, and I think the ages were from like 2 to 21, and he would dig them up, and he would dress them out and paper mache their faces and do all their stuff to make them look like dolls, add baking soda to the cavities of their body and all other stuff to basically have them be his, what's the word I'm looking for? Funky little puppets? I have no idea, but this is horrible stuff. I'm going to drive this home for you, and then I'm going to read the news account, because I want you to hear the background. I especially want you to hear the background of how this guy became the doll maker. Okay, take a look at this one. This is unfortunate and weird. This is what is known as mummy number 5. And this is the real little girl on the photo that I'm showing on the left. And that was what he did with her on the right. Now, she legitimately passed away. And, you know, and he basically dug her up. But let me read this to you while you check out this photo here. It says, Anatoly Moskvin, 52, immediately dug up 29 dead children and mummified their corpses, turning them into dolls in an apartment that he shared with his parents, who surprisingly had no idea of horrific activities. I don't know about you, but I was probably working on hairy knuckles, and that's the worst I could be, or hairy palms could be accused of. But how does somebody go to making mummies in his bedroom and the parents don't know? I mean, right? I mean, this is just, you're right. Here's this beautiful little girl, and you're right. It had to be some sort of fetish. Joe said he put lotion on the skin. Joe, I don't know, is that what you read, or is that your personal take on how to do it best? Anyway, his social life must have been dead. I think you're right. His social life had been dead. You asked how long were they dead, or were they newly married? Most of them are newly married. Here, let me continue to read. In a shocking incident, Moscovin reportedly told the distressed parents present in the court. And of course, they brought this guy in. They caught him, right? And it gets just, somebody could have took a weird look at it. But here was his explanation. Ready for this? You abandon your girls. You abandon your girls. I just brought them home and I warmed them up. That was what he said in the courtroom, right? And it wasn't the fact that his macabre makeover wasn't enough. Get this, ready? When the police went in and they started seizing the bodies, right? And they started picking them up. The dolls spoke. And yeah, he literally, kind of like the pull the string talking things, he embedded in their chest music boxes and speaking boxes where they go, mama, or or I'm so happy, thank you, Aunt Toby. I don't know what he put in it, but when the police started moving them, these dolls literally started making sounds, right? The authorities revealed that the deranged man marked, get this, he celebrated all of their birthdays on a calendar in his bedroom. Remember, he'd go around, he's working for the very paper that wrote the obituary, so he knew everything about them. He wrote their birthdays on the calendar and he'd set them up and have little tea parties with them. He had these remains. How long do you think he got away with this? Right? How long do you think he got away with playing with his chatty Cathy, you're right, mummy dolls, right? How long do you think he got away with it? This guy did this for 9 years. 9 years. He kept these little made up mummies that he created from these little girls' remains. He had them all staged around his house, 50 of them, before the police found out. And his parents, again, were totally oblivious. They filed 44 counts of abusing grace and corpses of girls aged 3 to 12 in the 2013 period. That's what he did that. They said he had schizophrenia and couldn't stand trial, so they ultimately sent him to maximum security psychiatric clinic. Now, he was, this is really weird, they guess, talk about what you know, but the guy was actually publishing reports. Nobody put it together for 9 years. Here's the guy that works for the local paper that writes all the obituaries, and he's giving the histories because he was such a well-known historian and all this other stuff, right? And he's writing articles on how to mummify people. Each of these girls, when they were found, and I'm going to tell you this, Angus, there was a smell, and I'm going to tell you about it. Each of these girls, when they were found, right? literally not only had been dressed up and made up, okay, they were found with instructions. They were found with instructions of how he mummified each and every one of them, and if it was going to be duplicated, how you could duplicate his process. So he actually left how-to manuals. The guy's not dead. I'm kind of speaking of him in the past tense. He's just locked away, but he's not dead, right? But you're right. This is truly this is why I had it. This is sick. Sometimes when they say life in real life is weirder than fiction, this is one that was definitely weirder than fiction. I can see the movie coming out. They called him, Russians never get the really good names right. I called him the doll maker. I think that's better. They called him the Lord of the Mummies. That just didn't work for me. But let me read you a little bit more. This little girl that you see on the screen, her name was Olga. And she happened to have been murdered at the age of 10, and he went and knew about it because he's reading these things, and he basically feels that he went and rescued her, right? And when they first went to arrest him, his mother says, we saw these dolls, but we didn't suspect there were dead bodies inside. We just thought it was his hobby to make such big dolls and didn't see anything wrong with it. And ironically, the building in Russia had such, oh, Joe, that's priceless. Jeff Dahmer. Now that's funny. That's very funny. I like that. The building that he lived in had such bad plumbing that the building always kind of stank from the basement. So there was a perpetual stink in the building, and everybody just thought that perpetual stink that was there was just it, right? Now, here's, I'm going to give you the coup de grace at the end here to describe what was his tipping point, right? And this is my wrap up here. Is this, what was this guy's tipping point that made him basically become enamored with something so totally weird, right? What would make somebody literally take, even after the fact that this beautiful young girl was murdered, right? And the trauma of her parents, and her parents visited her grave for years, visited her grave, not knowing he had pulled her back up and excavated and turned their little girl into the mummy. But here is the event in his life that turned him into this. And remember, this is a 52-year-old, multi-degreed, multi-language speaking historian who somehow dove off into this necromancy world. Here's the story of what did it. He, in his confession, and then an article, ironically, that was published in the very newspaper he worked for, right? They got the scoop on the story. Imagine that. I can see the editor go, hey, that was my guy that made mummies out of the girls. We got a scoop on the story, right? Wow. Okay. And so they got the scoop on the story. Here's what he said. He said, he describes that when he was 13, his inspiration for the dead came about. And that was for him back in 1979. He said he was stopped by people on the road in black suits that were carrying a coffin. So people are walking down the road, and this old Russian town. This is obviously a very rural Russian area, old Russian town. And they're carrying the corpse through the street. And this is a tradition, right? It's not really weird. This is their tradition. It's kind of like saying goodbye. And the streets are really narrow, and everybody kind of lines their apartment buildings and stuff. And as the procession, as the dead go by, everybody, you know, I guess does their well wishes or whatever. And what he said was that he happened to be on the street, and the procession stopped, okay? And where these people with the black suits are carrying in this coffin the body of an 11-year-old girl, and her name, he remembers it, was Natasha Petrova, Natasha Petrova. And he was, by one of the people in the procession, forced to kiss the dead girl in the coffin, right, to show respect. So here's this 13-year-old boy, and here's this little 11-year-old dead girl, and he's got to lean over the coffin and kiss the dead girl in the coffin. And he said, I did it. I kissed her once. Then I kissed her again. And then I kissed her again. And he said that started with him what he calls a mystical ritual, because the little dead girl's mother, right, pulled off her wedding ring, grabbed this little boy, blessed him for blessing the daughter, and said, you know, something like, my daughter would have loved you, whatever, and slid her wedding ring on her finger and married him to this little dead 11-year-old Natasha Petrova. And he said it was that experience that basically in some way became a serious magic moment for him, that he basically was forever intertwined. And that's why he became a historian about cemeteries. And that was what all his papers were written about, the dead, especially young girls. And looking back at it, they said there was this weird kind of obsession fantasy part of it. And that is how historian Anatoly Moskvin became the doll maker. And that is why when you see these photos, these are not dolls, but really deceased people. And he really felt that they were abandoned. They were abandoned he basically felt that when these young girls died, that there was still value to their dead bodies, especially to him in some fantasy way, right? That there was still use for them, and that line got blurred for him, and he became the person who basically was more comfortable from the dead. And I don't know. I mean, I guess this would be pedophilia of some sort, because they were 3-year-old, 12-year-old, or 13, or whatever I said. And he did in some ways romance them, I guess. But you talk about a weird story. Sometimes, somewhere, somebody is going to make a horror flick out of this. I know. I know in the 1970s, I don't remember what it was. It might have been a Twilight Zone, but I know one of the things that terrified me, I saw on TV, was and it gives me chills right now going down my spine. It was a show, and the mom had bought the little girl a doll, and the doll was a little black girl, very pretty little black girl doll, gave it to this little blonde girl on TV, and at night somehow they switched bodies, and now alive was a little black girl, and now the little blonde girl was the doll. And that like freaked me out when I was a kid. It like totally freaked me out. So one of the things that made me think of this story is Yeah, Susan said necropedophilia, necropedophilia, or maybe it's instead of a D, pedophilia, it's PET, petophilia, because he basically petted them and turned them into a pet or something. And so I thought you would appreciate that particular story. Tom, I thought somebody would gauge it. I'm not wearing nail polish on my fingers. Without going into a very long story, my fingernails at a different point in time in my life had been removed. And over years and years of you can either have your fingertips amputated, or you can work continually with the scar tissue created from the trauma of them being ripped out. And you have to literally, over years, shave down scar tissue and shave down scar tissue and shave down scar tissue. And you have to train your nails to grow back out. And so this is a very powerful type of iodine that helps it. I'm many, many years into it, and I'm very close to having fingernails again on my right hand. So that's what it is. It's not, I know every now and then you can catch it in a flash, and I try to hide it when I see it flash up in the camera, but that's what it is. And so I'm looking forward to having two hands with fingernails on them. You know what you are when you have two hands with all the fingernails been ripped out. It means they killed you when they tortured you. So I only have one hand of good, wonderful nails. Anyway, I hope you enjoy that story, right? And what a wackadoodle. Look him up. I'm going to put his name up again so you can see it. Anatoly Moskvin. Anatoly Moskvin. And how funny is, I have a call in the morning. I have a 8:30 conference call in Russia. But Anatoly Moskvin, right? You can look him up. He's known as, just type in Russian historian mummy maker, the guy who would take corpses and make dolls out of them. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the story. I know it's a wackadoodle one. Share it. It's really creepy. What makes it really, really creepy is that it's absolutely true. Let me show you. I'm gonna leave you with a little tidbit here. Let me go back to the screen, and I'm just going to share with you the video as when they went through his house, right? And detailed the mummies within when they found it. So let's go. I'm going to leave you with this little tidbit. Enjoy.
The remains of the day. One man and his rather bizarre family meet Anatoly Moskvin's macabre doll collection. They're unsettling looking, and well, they might be, as police spokeswoman Svetlana Kovalina explains.
28 ростовых кукол, которых он... Police found 28 human-sized dolls which he had prepared himself, using clothes which were stolen from the graves in cemeteries, and also mummified fragments of human bodies.
Yes, that's right. If all's to be believed, the lot are mummified remains, 28 of them in all. Anatoly digging the bodies up, women only, and bringing them home. There in the seclusion of his flat, he dressed them up with clothes he pinched from the dead as well, and then popped them around the house, for a bit of company maybe. Quite how police found anything in the flat is amazing. Anatoly's not exactly known for his tidiness. However, one thing he is known for is graveyards, widely seen in certain scientific circles as an expert on local cemeteries. The clues were sadly all there.